Welcome to the episode 2 of Humans of Creative. Every month we're going to be interviewing some of the most interesting people across the design and innovation space. And this week we have Kath Blackham. Is it Blackham?
Yes, it is Blackham. You got it right. Most people say Blackman, but
Blackham.
Yeah.
No, honestly, amazing to have you on board and to have a quick chat with you. We did have a call a few weeks ago, and you told me a few stories, which got me thinking this could be quite a good chat. So
let's just go for
it. You introduce yourself, because look, versus your thing, versus your passion.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about yourself. Yeah.
Okay, so, well, I don't know how much you want, but yes, Kath Blackham. I'm the founder and CEO at Versa. So Versa is a conversational AI agency, and we can talk about that more or not later on. But I basically started the company about 11 years ago, and I started it as just a bog standard digital agency, started a voice agency about 4 years ago, and then have recently brought them together as a conversational AI agency. So it's been fun. My background is in, I was the head of product at REA and Seek, and so that's my background. And going way back, my background is in market research. So that's the boring work stuff.
I kind of owe you quite a lot, Kath, and I've probably never thanked you enough about this. But when we started DigiTalent, and obviously I moved down to Melbourne to open up our practice there, you were the first person to give me a leg up. I mean, you let me hot desk in Versa, deep end at the time.
We loved having you. It felt like you were part of our family.
Well, I was part of the team, and I really, really enjoyed that. And if it wasn't for that, I mean, I don't think DigiTalent as a company across Melbourne would have grown so quickly. That's
I'm glad to hear it. We've got some very good people along the way as well. So it's been a win-win for both of us, I think.
Well, look, enough about me. This is about you. Now, look, This podcast is all about telling the real human stories behind these people.
Yeah.
So I know you've got an interest in life. Like, let's just start right at the beginning.
Yeah.
And let's work from there. Like I said, we've got no script, got no timeline whatsoever. So pick out those most important parts of your life and let's just have a chat with it and see where it goes.
Okay. So you really want me to begin at the beginning?
Well, okay. The first interesting thing that happened in your life that took you on that path.
It's interesting because actually I think my love of or my path to the business world, if you like, was probably set pretty early, unusually early. I've got photos of my dad because my mum and dad were together until I was about 8 years old. And I've got photos of my dad when I was 4 years old. So I'm just a tiny tot. And he's taking me to Auckland. So this is from Wellington for a business meeting. And he used to take me along and I'd sit in these kind of boardroom chairs and fall asleep probably or whatever I did. But that was the beginning of so it's quite now looking back, I didn't think it was unusual at the time. I don't think our family thought it was unusual at the time, but looking back, it's quite unusual, right? To take your 4-year-old along to not meetings in the actual city, but actually fly on a plane, go to meetings. So God knows why he did that.
You had to.
Yeah.
Where would they have put you? I mean,
no, I don't know. Well, my mum wasn't working, so I'm not quite sure. Anyway, that was I guess where it all started for me. And then when I was obviously, like I just said, my parents separated when I was 8, and at the time we were living in Melbourne. We went back to New Zealand, and that definitely had a massive, as it does for everyone, had a massive impact on me. But we continued to see my father, and I always say the greatest gift that my mum ever gave us. I mean, she's an amazing woman, but she never said a bad word about my father through the whole thing. so I kept a good relationship with him. And then when I was 13, Dad, and I can't go into too much detail, I don't think, but basically ASIO asked my father to go to Russia to have a meeting with someone, and very important over there. And they suggested that he took his daughter with him. So when I was 13 years old, my dad, we actually went on we went to London and Paris and then Russia. And I went and had lunch with a very senior member of the KGB when I was 13. And it was it's hard to describe, but if you imagine the kind of a really big restaurant, so there's this huge restaurant full of people eating their lunch. And then we walk in with this person, and everybody at the restaurant gets up immediately, like in the middle of their meals, and walks out. And then we have lunch by ourselves. So I kid you not, this is exactly, so you can imagine from little old New Zealand. I'm from like this place called Fielding, which is about 2 hours up from Wellington. So it's tiny, a tiny farming town. And I get plucked out of this farming town and I'm in Russia where something like that happened. So
can I ask what your father's job was?
So he was he was a meat and dairy trader. So he used to he's had an incredibly interesting life. He has been to all these war-torn countries. He his most amazing story, I think, is and I won't do it justice, but he was in El Salvador during the troubles there, and he saw somebody be beheaded in the town square. And at the time, no journalist was able to, it was really locked down because they obviously didn't want to show the atrocities that were happening. And he was standing next to this journalist, and this journalist just shoved this film in his pocket and said, "You need to get this out. People need to see this." So anyway, he did. He got the photos out. It was I think it was the New York Times, or it was somebody in the US anyway. So he got those photos out, and then 20 years later, I think this is vaguely like, if my father ever sees this, he would go, "No, it actually happened exactly like this." But basically, 20 years later, or whatever it was, he met this woman through his best friend in Amsterdam, and that. It was that woman's husband that my dad saw beheaded, and they'd never met before. Like, think of all the gazillion people around the world, and he met this one person that was kind of life-changing for him, right? Like, you don't go back from something like that. Like, once you see, you can't unsee something like that. So, so anyway, but he was just he used to just sell lamb and butter basically to the Russians, and it's quite a it's just one of those business where you have to go to these countries that maybe normal people wouldn't go to. So that was also on the sorry, go.
I was going to say, so what how was your relationship like then with your mother and your father at that age? And were you living close by? I mean, were you able to kind of keep that communication up between the family? I mean,
so Dad lived in Melbourne. He stayed in Melbourne, and my mum went back to her hometown. So that's why we ended up in this tiny town in New Zealand, or not tiny, but small town in New Zealand. But my relationship with my stepfather was probably understandably fractious. Like, it was really, really tough for both of us. And tough on Mum. My dad is a very gregarious, out there guy, and he's a pretty amazing person. He can be pretty full on sometimes. We call him Mad Mike Murray for a reason. But he, so to be a stepdad in that environment where we're used to having that very out there, gregarious, man in our lives, and suddenly there's this quite very consistent, very reliable, to not put too fine a point on it, guy was just too much. And I'm definitely, there's definitely elements of my dad in me. And so I think that kind of annoyed my stepfather as well. So I got on really well with my mum. My dad and I we've come and gone over the years. Like, it's difficult. He would have loved me to go and work for him. He's had his own business for 30, 40 years. So he would have loved for me to go there, and I chose not to, and to take my own path. And that was really hard for him. So there's been definitely periods of time that have been difficult because of that. So, but I love traveling with him, and that's where I got my itchy feet from. So, yeah.
Do you have any siblings that could have taken over the family business, or?
I've got two younger brothers. Yeah. One's a greenkeeper, nice. And the other has been a truck driver off and on most of his life. So, no, not so much. So I was probably, it maybe my middle brother, who's the greenkeeper, he might have, that was a possibility at some stage. But I think that as a parent, you have to kind of realize that let your kids do what they need to do. But and now that I'm 100%. A parent, I'm realizing how hard that is, as I micromanage my daughter and son's entire lives to fit the stereotype of what I think they should want to do. I want them to be a huge success, and I want them to make their mark on the world and stuff. And they may not be that person, and that needs to be okay. But parenthood is tough.
So at that age, did you have any idea what you wanted to do in life, or where you wanted to go, what you wanted to be?
Well, look, growing up, I definitely had these two sides to me that have really molded where I've ended up, I believe. So my mum's a nurse and is an incredibly giving woman. So I remember even, I was just thinking about this the other day, actually, even when my dad had left her, she had 3 kids, 8, 6, and 3 or 4, I think, full on, like really full on. Yeah. And even in that, we had very little money. So we really, growing up, didn't have much money to speak of, particularly at that time. And even then, not only did she do a full-time job, but she also worked at Samaritans, which is like Beyond Blue, like the equivalent of Beyond Blue in New Zealand. So she volunteered there at night. And we used to go in it used to be called the IHC, which is not a very PC way. It's so children with disabilities, basically. So they kind of the van that used to take these kids with disabilities around. She used to also volunteer to do that and take us with her, and we would go and drop off. So even in a world where her life must have been horrifically busy and pretty awful and really stressful, even in that she chose to volunteer, do 2 volunteer posts plus be a nurse. So I think part of me was really guided by that, and has been almost my guiding light through my life. And then the other part came a bit late. So I always wanted to be a nurse. I thought I would be a nurse. That's what I was definitely destined to be. Right. I think I'd probably be running a hospital now if that had been the case, to be honest. But and maybe that wouldn't have been a bad thing, but
improving the technology.
Yeah. So and then the other part was obviously my dad, and just he, I worked there every holidays. I was I started very early, that love. So by the time I got to 13, 14, I knew that I wanted to do business in some regard, but I never in a million years thought I would run my own company. I don't think I ever would in a million years think that I couldn't have dreamed of having my own business. It didn't seem possible.
Yeah, I mean, you all have these dreams. I mean, I remember as a child, not really knowing what I wanted to do and not really having any guidance whatsoever. And because a lot of the jobs around now just weren't there when we were kids.
Yeah.
So really we had no idea what was coming. And I always used to say to myself, I'm going to be a millionaire by 25. And then I'd get to 25 and I'd be nowhere near. I'd be like, right, I'm going to have my own business by 29, 30. And again, still not there. But finally find my feet.
Anyway,
you find your feet. You fall into things. So I never really knew what I was going to do. And it's very interesting to see how people actually fall into things, or whether they were that determined and had something focused that they were going to just go for it, and they got it in the end.
Yeah.
So
I actually think it's interesting looking at kids of today. I feel very passionately about the fact that we should be teaching, and we do to a certain extent, but teaching resilience and change management, and like primary school in particular, but even through into high school. I think it is much, much more important to learn how to cope with conflict, how to cope with change, how to because the kids that are coming out of school now and into, we know the world is a really uncertain place, and last year is just one example of that. It's not the only example that we've seen. And so that ability to, and you talk about it, and you're that person and I'm that person, that ability to pivot and rotate yourself towards opportunity, and to be able to not curl into a ball and, freak out when things change, is incredibly important. And I don't think that schools do enough of getting people ready for what is to come. So, if you could be good at feedback and conflict, you could pretty much do any job.
Yeah.
Like that's
they don't really teach you how to live at school. That's the thing.
No.
They don't teach you how to tackle life, and everything you've just explained there would be vital as a kid. And they're actually things that I've only learned really further on in my life, I think, just purely through experience. And I think if I had actually had an idea about that before coming out of school, I think I would have been set up a lot earlier in life in terms of kind of managing things.
Yeah. But not everything. I mean, and I'm sure we'll cover this, but I've been really vocal around obviously the working week and kind of re-looking at that. But I think actually just re-looking at education is like the working week. Like 100 years ago, pretty much the structure was the same. You turned up to a classroom, you did maths, English, science, and obviously now there's more modern subjects, and there's more there's a well-being team there to help you with your mental health. So we've moved on, but actually fundamentally changing the structure of how we teach kids, and recognizing I have what they call a neurodiverse daughter. So my daughter's got ADHD, and it's been really interesting going through the process because she can't learn the same as everybody else can. And so we'll probably not do very well at school, and actually may not do that well at university either, because it's all set up for learning, exams, focusing, and she just can't focus. Actually, I know that she's going to be a success because she is a pretty amazing human being, actually, but it's going to be really hard from now, I reckon, until she's 25, because there's all these social norms that are not going to be as easy for her. But once she gets through that, she'll find her spot and she will thrive. It's just, how do we look at education a bit differently? Anyway, that's it. As you can tell, I'm that person that sits on my soapbox. You have to drag me off my soapbox sometimes.
I mean, it's interesting stuff. I mean, we could talk about that for hours, really. And I completely agree on everything you're saying. So in terms of education then, so you were 13 years old, I think we got to.
So I went to lots of schools when I was young, but by the time I got to high school, I went to my Fielding Agricultural High School, it was called, would you believe? So it had a massive farm attached to it that kids went and did, a day a week on the farm as their, that's what I think you did it twice a year. Most of the kids did. But I actually believe, and it's been interesting, now that I've got my own kids and stuff, my daughter's in a private school, and I'm really torn by that because I went to a state school. I didn't have a lot of money growing up. It was a normal childhood. It wasn't like we were on the streets or anything. Like, we had money, but just not masses of it. And I actually think that it really set me up well. And what I worry constantly about is being in a bubble, putting my kids in a bubble, this private school bubble where everybody else has money. It was normal for me to have friends that had lots of money and friends that had no money, and friends that, so I learned very quickly how to just be friends with everybody, and that it didn't matter at my school, because when you only have one school in the town, everybody goes there. There's no posh suburb and not so posh suburb. There's just one town. And so I really think that did me a lot of favors, and I worry for my children that they just won't get access to that. And I don't know what the answer is, but for me, that was really grounding and set me up for what I did.
And is her school single sex as well, or?
No. So it's co-ed. And look, it's pretty down to earth where she is, but it's just not. It's not as down to earth as it was where I was from, without putting too fine a point on it. And she's been able to, my kids, particularly my daughter, who's a bit, Emily, has, they've obviously got their cousins are still back where I grew up. And so I think that has kept them grounded. Kids these days around us, where I'm in Hampton, just near Brighton, they're just used to having everything. Like, they don't have to, it's like, oh, what do you mean you're not going to Europe for the holidays? Like, are you, what do you mean you can't ski? Like, when I was growing, that was just not a thing. Like, no one would say that. So, so saying that, I did, because I did have a father that loved traveling and desperately wanted to me to travel. I was an exchange student. So I actually did a AFS, it's called American Field Scholar. So I did a exchange program to Spain when I was 16. So by the time I was 16, I was living overseas with a Spanish family, having the time of my life. I lived in Sevilla. At 16, I used to sit on the school bus, and everyone would be smoking during the breaks at school. All the teachers and all the students would go out and have a cigarette. And I thought that was so cool in those days. I now know that's not cool, but in those days I thought it was cool. And we were out till 2 a.m. on a school night. It's just a crazy lifestyle, or it was in those days. So I didn't do a full year. I think I did 6 months. So and that was absolutely.
Did you learn Spanish?
I did learn Spanish, and then I got in the whole lot because I came back and didn't study it or didn't do anything with it. But I had to. My host family, I clearly remember spending my first day there. You get there with your host family, and they didn't speak English. The parents didn't speak English, and them just saying cuchara, cuchara, tenedor, which is knife, fork, spoon. And it's actually not that, but anyway, you get my drift. And that's how I started. Like, literally, we started with, this is a knife, this is a fork, this is a spoon. Now let's learn some other words. So it was great, and I had a ball. I didn't want to go home. And I think what that did for me is, by the time I got home and finished off school, I was done for. I tried to do a year of uni. I dropped out in New Zealand. I was what is commonly referred to as a dropout. And then I went to Switzerland and lived there and in Russia. So I lived in Russia and Switzerland for a year.
Yeah, right.
A year and a half. Maybe.
And how old are you here?
A year and a half. So by this stage, I'm 18. So I've made it to 18. I've left school. I've done a year of uni. I'm a dropout. And actually my 19th year, it was a year and a half, I think, I spent in, basically doing in Switzerland, and then moved to Russia.
What made you go to Switzerland and Russia?
I just got a job in Switzerland with it through a contact of my father's. I got a job with this trading company, so similar to what he was doing. He didn't have anything to do with them, but I just kind of got it through him. And then through them, I got this opportunity to go to Russia. And so I was like, yeah, I'll go to Russia. Like, no worries. And that was incredibly challenging. Like, Switzerland was amazing. Like, anybody, I was, it took me a little bit of time. I thought I wanted to learn to meet Swiss people. And 2 months into my time there, or 6 weeks into my time there, I'd still met no one, basically. And I was walking around, I was living by myself. I was walking around just the streets by myself. It was a pretty lonely existence.
Why was it so difficult?
The Swiss in Geneva, I lived in Geneva, and they're very, they just get sick of, like, foreigners come and go there. You know, it's got the UN, and like there's a lot of international organizations in Geneva. And so they don't have the same feeling of, foreigner, I really want to meet someone interesting. There are foreigners everywhere. So it's almost like a them and us. And so I just struggled a bit because I was working for this Swiss company, very small, older people that I had nothing in common with. And then I met one of the daughters. I remember that, but that was it. Like, I wasn't not trying. I was going to bars by myself. I was like, I just couldn't break through and meet locals. And so then one weekend I actually got really sick and just decided that it wasn't good to just be in this city, and how was I going to get through? You know, you can't not. I think I actually know that's not true. My birthday, I had my birthday and I told no one because there was no one to tell. And so I just kind of went, that's miserable. Like, I'm not going to spend I'm either going to do something or I'm going to go. And so that weekend I walked into an Irish bar in the old town, and I went up to Anya, who was the boss there, the owner of the bar. And I just said, you know, my name's Kath and I don't know anyone. I need to meet people. This is my story. Will you let me come and work for nothing? I don't want any payment. I just want to come and work behind the bar so I can meet some people. I'll just do it for a week. And if you let me do it for a week, I reckon I'll back myself that I can make some friends in that week. And so, so I went and worked for her, and that was the start of, I met all these people. I realized they were all living in this massive halls of residence. So I moved out of my beautiful apartment on the lake that I'd been given as part of my job, took that as money and went and shared a room with, in this halls thing that all the people that were working at the UN and working at all these international, and had an absolute ball. There was 80 of us. We traveled every single weekend. You go to Italy, and then you go to, because we were right in the middle of it. So that was that. And then through that job, I met a couple of guys who were wanting to go up and start up in Russia. So I went with them and started up this company with them in Russia, doing kind of trading, helping supermarkets in Russia buy food for from foreign people, so foreign companies. Like, I don't know why at 19 I thought I could do that. I actually started this. I still have an article that the Australian wrote on me when I was 19 years old. I was in Vladivostok opening the first foreign supermarket with foreign goods. And if you ask me now to go and do that, I would say to you, I can't do that. Like, no way I'd be able to go. But at 19, you honestly think you're capable of anything.
Yeah, you do.
Because you haven't
crazy.
Failed yet, right? I didn't get the memo that people fail. So I just, anyway, so that was terrifying. Russia. So Switzerland was great. Russia was just, was it fun? I don't even know if it was fun. It was interesting.
Sounds difficult.
I've never vomited so much in my entire life because you drink so much vodka on an empty stomach. And I just had that base that Russians have. Like they kind of grow up drinking vodka. And so you go around to people's places and, you know, you can walk in the front door and here you get offered maybe a G&T or a Shams. Over there, it's like straight vodka, straight out of the freezer to make sure that there's no, like, it's just pure spirit. So anyway, and that was great. And Vladivostok, you know, I mean, for a big chunk of the time I was in Vladivostok, there was no hot water. So that's what that was like. And we were staying, and the food was so scarce that you had to, in the place that I was staying at, you had to cut up the meat if you didn't eat it, so that they didn't serve it to you the next day. So there was this kind of thing that all the foreigners used to do to kind of mark the meat to make sure that, because they would just keep serving it up to you until you ate it, basically.
What year is this? Where are we?
So we are early 90s.
Early 90s,
so this is just before Leeds. So, is... So I think 80s I was, so I think maybe 91, 92, maybe 92, something like that. So
what made you kind of leave Russia then? And what was your next
I was
step
always going to. So I had already planned on going to the UK and going to uni. So I knew that I wanted to go to uni. I wanted to have that. I'd had a year of, you know, being a bit of a drop kick. So I knew that A, it was fun, B, that it I knew, and by that stage I'd been working. I knew that I had stuff to learn, and I had a bit more of a thirst to do that at that point. So I'm not hugely academic, so I don't find study that easy, but I really love it. So I went to Leeds University and did a joint honours of management and French. For some reason,
and you picked one of the best cities in the world to go to university.
I did. And it wasn't just because my husband, and it wasn't just because my husband was there, but it was, it was so. I don't know about now, but the early 90s or that early to mid 90s. So by now we're at 93 or 94. Was just amazing. Such an amazing time. Super clubs. I was really into that music. Anyway, had a good time. We probably won't talk about that just in case my kids ever see that. So
you need to tell me one thing about Back to Basics. You mentioned this the other week when we spoke.
Oh no,
if anyone doesn't know this, Back to Basics is like a legendary nightclub night in Leeds. And it's been going for years. It's actually stopped now, Kath. I mean,
has it?
I'm not
surprised. A few years ago now. That's 20. It was still going 20 years ago. That's ago. But anyway. That I just, you know, where you just have those memories, and I think part of it is just the whole thing was I just have these really vivid memories of just pure happiness, you know, where you're dancing, and at Basics used to have this glass so you could watch the sun come up over, and it was yeah, just all of it was amazing. And I
Yeah.
wouldn't take those times back for anything. And I realized that some people probably took their partying and maybe took it a bit far. But for me, that was a moment for me, and I loved it, and I wouldn't change it for the world. So I did manage to get a degree as well, though. So that I think there was a lot of people that partied a little bit too hard at uni. Whereas I managed to have
I did a bit of that. I mean, I was at Manchester, which is only 45 minutes from Leeds.
Also
and Back to Basics was still going in my last few years at uni. So we used to drive up there, like on a Saturday afternoon, straight to Basics for a night out, meet our friends in Leeds. And you're right. It's just it's something special about it, and to just be dancing till silly hours in the night with your closest friends is just. I mean, I had some great times as well, so I can completely relate to what you went through back then. When you told me you were at Leeds, I was like, oh my God, Kath, I love this.
And look, there was, there's just so many good memories. And that is, I just don't think you want to leave anything left on the table. And that's my has been my mantra right from then. And I think that at uni, I felt that, like I didn't leave anything on the table. I had such a great time. We had great friends. And I actually met my husband, who, that's a weird story. So when I was at school, so going back into my final year of school, they call it the GAP program. So it's, I can't remember what it stands for, but basically all these English students go over to New Zealand and work in schools. And, I met my husband then. He wasn't actually working at my school. He was one of the guys that was working at my school was good friends with him. And so when I went to uni in New Zealand, him and this other friend of mine came and stayed on my floor for the night. So I only really met Dom once, and I was like, Kath, Dom, Kath, whatever, and that was it. And then whatever it was, 2 or 3 years later, 3 years later maybe, I turn up at Leeds University at Devonshire Hall, which is the halls of residence there. And this was this ball that we had at the beginning to, meet everybody. And there was Dom.
So you didn't know he was in Leeds?
Oh, no, God, no. No.
So you hadn't seen him since?
I had literally just met the guy once. Because he came and slept on my floor at uni because they were travelling through Hamilton where I was at uni.
Yeah, unbelievable.
And so,
such a good story.
And so we kind of met, and he had a girlfriend at the time, and I had a boyfriend at the time, and but we became really good friends because I didn't know anyone. I had my ex-boyfriend who was this guy called Tim and his wonderful parents from the Lake District. And I had my stepbrother in London, and that was it. That was all really the people I knew. So anyway, so that was.
So who made the first move?
I'm sure I did. It won't surprise you that I'm sure I think the first move didn't come for another year and a half, and after that. Really? And I think by that stage.
How long were you in the UK for? How long were you there for?
In total, I think I was away for 10 years, 8 to 10 years. And I was one of these people, I probably shouldn't be saying this out loud, but I never had a proper visa for the UK. So I got a student visa. I got the student visa, and then I'd done a couple of years in Europe to got a student visa. So that was 4 years with a year in Paris. And then because I lived in Paris for a year as part of my degree. And then I actually ended up getting I did the 2-year visa, the 2-year working holiday visa that all of the Aussies get. And then you can't do that. You cannot do this these days, but back in those days, it wasn't electronic. All your passports and everything weren't electronic. So I lost my passport, let's just say. And I had heard on the grapevine that if you went to Portugal, so you literally had to turn up at the passport office just before 2 p.m., which is their lunch break. And it was kind of knowing that they would speed things through for you. And so I turned up, said I'd lost my passport. So I applied for a new passport. It was all clean. And I said, turned up at the British consulate, which was obviously full of, I can't even remember if they were British. I presume they were British, but on Portuguese time. And I had no idea. I was with my husband and one of my best mates from New Zealand, and I didn't know if I was going to be able to get back into the country or not. And they basically stamped my passport and I got another 2 years. And then I got a job and they never asked me whether I had a proper visa. So which I didn't. I had a working holiday visa, which I told them that I was doing care work because you weren't allowed to do big official jobs in that working holiday. And anyway, so I lived in my job before I left London was actually traveling all over Europe. And so I used to have to, so I can't even believe I did this. I used to go to the airport dressed as a backpacker, leave the country, then go for my day of meetings, and then come back, get changed at the airport into my backpacker gear again, and come through as a backpacker.
Is this because you weren't meant to be working?
I wasn't supposed to be working, so I couldn't be dressed in. And I'll never forget the moment. It was about 6 months before I left. We were coming through the, Channel Tunnel in the car with a whole lot of my workmates because we'd been to Germany or somewhere for a work trip. And I was sweating because I was like, well, I mean, these are my workmates. My boss was there. And I just had to say, and I just said, look, I'm so sorry, everybody. By that stage, I'd been working there a couple of years. I've got to tell you, it's not entirely legal. And
we might get
if they stop us, I'm going to tell them that I'm not working in this job anyway. And then one of my boss, I think it was like, "Oh, don't worry, he'd been arrested for something, and he was totally worried because he'd done something really bad." And so it was nice to get it off my chest. But when I could have just got married, like that was an option, but I felt I was this really feisty Kiwi that didn't want to be forced into getting married for a visa. So that's why we ended up coming over here.
So what was the job?
What was I doing when I was, I was doing market research. So
market research, right.
Yeah. And I loved, I was pretty feisty back then though. I thought that I was like the bee's knees. Like I was that one that just thought that I always thought that I was just actually told this in a job, interview for an article the other day that, I was the one that was telling my boss, I was telling my boss's boss's boss that my boss was a waste of space, like I just, I always had a lot of confidence, put it that way. So, and I always made sure and I always seem to have, right throughout my career, actually, I seem to have been able to, I'm an early starter, and my learning from that job that I kept going with was often the CEO. So it was a 6,000 person company, and our office was on Hanger Lane. And so I used to get in to work at 6 a.m. in the morning. So I would work really, really early, and the only other person in the whole building, so there was 2,000 of us, so 6,000 person company, 2,000 of us at head office. The only other person that came in at that time was the CEO of the whole company. So remember, I'm like 25 at this stage, my first job out of uni. So him and I got to know each other really well because he would walk past my desk, and at first he didn't say anything. And then obviously one day he was like, "Wow, you're here early." And I'm like, "Yeah, I like to get in." And anyway, so I built up a really good relationship with him, which really paid dividends.
So at what point did you decide to go back to Melbourne, was it? Or
so we just decided, Dom, my husband, got a a place. He was offered a place on a PhD. So he did his PhD back in Melbourne. And at the same time, I was offered a job actually in Sydney. So when I moved back to Australia, I kind of lived in Melbourne but worked in Sydney during the week. So I lived with my cousin up in Sydney and worked Monday to Friday up there, and then would come back down here for the weekend. So I did that for a year, I think. But it was really for the job. And so it was a market research company as well, but in digital, this new thing. This is an early, so we basically saw out the 2000 in Leeds. So we were living in London at the time, but we went up and had this massive blowout in Leeds for New Year's, and then kind of packed up all our stuff and came straight to Australia effectively. So really? Got here in early 2000 and I got into this thing called digital, and that was the start. And then went from that to seek.com.au, which is where, and then from there to realestate.com.au, where I was the head of product there, and then moved to Sydney for a year. So that's
who gave you that first in to digital then?
So it was, I had this very specific experience in market research of managing panels of it was supermarket users actually. And I can't even remember. I think it was somebody that knew someone, and they knew that I was from New Zealand. So they just contacted me and said, you've got all this experience in panels. You're from over this way. I don't suppose you'd come over. And so they from memory, it was just a cold call.
Was it? Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, that was meant to be. And I was ready. My niece, who is now 22, she'd just been born. And so I was feeling, and you know all about this, I was feeling very disconnected from my family, and I don't think we were up for moving back to New Zealand. I think it might have been a bit too close for my husband to be fully in the family thing, but getting somewhere close back so that I could go home. And as it turned out, less than a year. So I got back in 2000, and by May 2001, so I had that year in Sydney. By May 2001, I was traveling overseas all the time. So I was a global head of this, of product for this company, for this research company. And I had dropped into New Zealand on the 23rd of May just because it was my birthday, and I wanted to spend, I hadn't been able to spend my birthday with my family for a very, very long time. And 2 days later, my stepdad died, and I was there. So how weird is that? I just spent 10 years away. I lived in Australia. The chances of me being in New Zealand with my mum when she got the phone call to say that my stepdad had died. Yeah. Must have been, I don't know what it would be, but I just wasn't traveling. It's not like I go to New Zealand even every year. Well, back in those days, I wasn't even there every year, let alone.
Yeah. Well, you've been away for so long.
For 10 years.
Yeah, 10 years.
More than 10 years. Well, yeah. Yeah. So it was, so by this stage it was just unbelievable. So, so that was 20 years ago, basically, that he died. And we went out for dinner for my birthday, had a lovely evening actually all together, then had the next day, and then he literally went out and played golf and dropped dead of a heart attack. So, it was, it's one of those moments that I still to this day find that unbelievable. I can't even tell you how unusual it was and I was due to fly out that afternoon. So, anyway, I was happy to meant to happen.
Things like that change your life. I mean, deaths like that change your life. And the fact that you're able to be there, I mean, is amazing, isn't it? I mean, God.
Yeah. So, so that was that. And And then obviously I've just been really lucky. I think I've worked hard. I think I'm good at what I do. And then part of it is just luck. You just kind of make your own luck as you go along. And I've always been, so I was really young and managing, being a leader in a business. Like I just met up with the CTO of that business I was just talking about the other day, and we were just laughing because we're both the same age. And 20 years ago we were managing a reasonable sized team, and it's amazing that we were actually capable of doing that. Now that we're so much older and we know everything that we don't know, that we know that we didn't know a lot of stuff. And unbelievable that the company didn't go under with all these youngsters at the helm.
That's it. At what point did you kind of say to yourself, right, I want to do my own thing now? It's about time that I started something.
So I've been pretty open about the fact that I think I was just sick of working for people. I always worked for I had some amazing bosses. I mean, Paul Bassett from Seek was an incredible man I still to this day look up to him more than most people actually in business. But I also had some really challenging people that I worked for, and I think I had been working for a certain type of CEO, being in a leadership role for a long time by that stage, and so I'd had a couple of kids. I'd made some mistakes along the way in terms of I probably went back after having my daughter, so my first child, a bit quickly. And so I just decided I really, really wanted to give something a go. And a friend of mine, Matt Griffin, suggested that I start the Melbourne part of his business. So he'd been going for a while at that stage. So it was, sorry.
So that was Deep End.
Yeah, and that was Deep End. Yeah. So that was, so that was great. It's funny when you start your own business, and you would know this, that it's not as, for some people, I'm sure it's quite like fanfare-ish. Sometimes there is a bit of fanfare, but for me, because I've always owned it and run it by myself, it was literally drop my son at daycare for the first day on January the 17th and 2010 and go home and sit down on my couch and go, right, now the business has started, so it wasn't this, we incorporated it a couple of months earlier. Like I did all the admin, like actually in late 2009, but that very first day, it's terrifying, but also quite underwhelming at the same time, because it's not, you don't, I think when maybe if I started another company, there'd be more fanfare because, like when we started Versa, so, 5 years later, we started, Versa, or 6 years later we started Versa, and we did a big launch party and stuff. But when you start your own business that is just you're not going to go and do a launch. Like there's nothing to launch. It's just like, hey, so
you could do, but no one would probably come.
No, exactly.
I mean, I've been in that situation before. So.
And you're really not sure what to do. So I just started ringing people saying, hey, we should totally have a coffee. Let me come and tell you. And, and it was really, I remember clearly my first employee was my creative director, Andy, who's still with us. And I remember interviewing him with a 10-month-old, like following me around the cafe. It was just crazy. But it wasn't. It hasn't been perfect the whole way along. It's actually been a lot of hard work. And I think anyone that, I was just talking to somebody yesterday who runs a company that I was involved in the early days. And I was saying, how's it going? And he was like, oh my God, it's terrible. He said, I'm just exhausted. And I think that is what being a business owner is. That's what you don't see, because all the PR and you know, you don't tell people the bad stuff, and the bad stuff is that it's frightening and exhausting, and you know, you get knocked down almost as much as you get stood up. So it's and no matter what, and this is the most challenging thing about having your own company, no matter what, you got to show up every day. Not show up as in you got to come to work. Everybody has to do that. But you really have to show up. Like you've got to, you know, and through COVID, I think that was the most difficult thing for many business owners that I've spoken to, and certainly for me, is that I was terrified of what the future was. I was, you know, I'd made some very big investments in Seattle, and you know, I can't come into work and be anything less than 100%. I mean, I'm not always 100%, but because people are looking to you to feel good about themselves. And so if they see you faltering as the leader, then that doesn't look good for them. So I think that's the most challenging thing for me, but also the most rewarding. And I've been incredibly lucky. I feel like I have got so much out of Versa that is more than just, you know, I've literally been able to do my life's work, not just my work, using Versa as a platform. And there's not many people that can say that, you know, so I've been able to move, you know, do new things, focused on get people talking about mental health in the workplace, get people talking about diversity, all of that. It's just, and I just feel very, very grateful.
Do you want to tell us all about what you're up to at the moment then, with Versa, and what you're striving towards, and kind of, you just touched on your passions there. You're right there.
Yeah.
Have a glass of water. Get yourself a glass of water.
It's funny. I set out to run a successful business, and we're getting there on that. I set out to prove to the industry that I work in, which is kind of agency land. So everything from creative to digital and everything in between, that there was a different way of running and actually what I thought that I was going to be fighting for when I started, which was really around flexibility in the workplace, supporting women in the workplace, particularly women wanting to come back after children. That's what I started the business thinking that would actually has morphed into something much bigger. And that, for me, like I said, is really that mental health in the workplace and a new way of working. And, you know, and you've heard me say this 100 times, but we really have not looked at the way that we work for 100 years, and that is like, I just don't understand why we're not having more of a discussion around that. And I don't know why we're not talking more about the fact that there have been all these productivity gains in the last 20 years or 30 years or even 60 years if you take just machines generally. And none of that has gone back to the employee. So we are so much more productive than we were at the beginning of my career, so 25 years ago. And yet I am still being expected to accept the fact that I've got to work 5 days a week to get the same amount of work done. Like, it just doesn't make sense. Just at the most fundamental level, it doesn't. So the only people that are getting the benefit of the increase in productivity, and remember, we're getting more and more, right? Like, you've got automation with bots, and we're getting more and more and more productive as a human race. And the only people that are benefiting are the owners of businesses, the investors, the owners, the people like me. that's who is, and like you, like that, those are the people that are getting those gains. And for me, that is just not right. Like at some point we've got to stop and say, we need to give at least a day back to employees because we're just more productive and we don't have to work 5 days a week. Like the people that think of those really, really rich people, and I've got nothing against, the Bill Gates, I've got nothing against the Musks of this world. And I think that we need these incredible people that are willing to stick their neck out to make all of this money. But like, when is it enough money? When is it that these companies just stop making money and actually say, when is it that Amazon are going to stop and say, actually, we're making so much money here. Why don't we just give a day back to all our employees so that they can have a mental health break, so that they can spend more time with their family, they can do more exercise, they can live longer? Like, when is that going to happen?
And when is profit for purpose going to be a real thing for companies? A lot of companies these days do really think about that purpose and using that profit to really help the community in the wider space. And not enough companies do that. Profit. I mean, all these companies, billions and billions of dollars. I mean, they could really make a difference in life. And look, they do.
Absolutely. And I love what Bill Gates has done. I love it. But he's a bit of an outlier, I think. So, you can't just give to charities and go, job done. I think that there needs to be real change. Anyway, that I am so lucky because Versa has given me a platform to be able to show, and that's where the 4-day week came from. So we run a 4-day week, as you know. It's not perfect. People work Wednesdays every now and again, but generally speaking, we try and encourage people to work 37.5 hours over 4 days, not 5. Yeah. That they can have Wednesdays off. But where I'm really going with the business is, and this is my third thing, my piece of my life's work is to use tech for good, is I really want to, I believe the future is in conversation, is us being able to have conversations with brands, and brands really understand us. And the way to do that at scale is using technology. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm all about accessibility, multilingual experiences, just making things better. And so that's why 70% of our work is in not-for-profit and government work. And that's why I get up every morning. So, and I just love what I do. I'm super lucky, right? Because I absolutely love what I do. I'm so, as you know, anyone that works for me knows, I'm so passionate about what I do, and I can so clearly see, and this is the first time in my career this has happened, but I can so clearly see what the future is, and I just want, it's almost too much for me that people can't see it too. Like,
I was just about to say to you, what is your actual end goal? And it's a hard one, that, because I know that will change so often, because there's just the way that the industry is moving, technology is moving. There's just so much opportunity and just ideation around all these pieces. It's just endless.
Yeah, and my end goal is to really is for this to be, to be really come into its own. Because we're kind of ahead of the curve, right? So I want to be. I want the market to catch up to us and it to be amazing, and us to be really a world leader in something that is a game changer for everybody globally, and to be recognized for that. And I think that's, putting all the other kind of life's work to aside from a business perspective, that's what I set up the business for. That is why it's been super hard, and why people at Versa have to be comfortable being uncomfortable, because we're kind of sticking our necks out, and we've gone ahead of everybody just so that we can drop back and and hopefully I'm right. But I definitely won't die wondering, put it that way. So I've given it everything and everything I've done, so I won't die wondering, put it that way.
I can see you not retiring at all. I mean, you're not the type of person that's built this business to then sell in 10 years' time and make a few mil and then retire.
No.
I feel like it's going to be an endless journey for you.
Yeah, although there is a part of me, I've got 8 mentees at the moment, so I do huge amount of mentoring. My specialism is I actually was telling someone this in a meeting yesterday, and I think they were a little taken aback because I was like, oh, by the way, this person runs a very big team, and I was like, I love mentoring if you've got any females, and I said, my specialism is females aged 28 to 32, and she was like, wow, that's really specific. And I went, well, yeah. And the thing is that not all my mentees sit in that age, definitely in that age bracket, but it is really what it's about is helping females in particular understand that, when you want to have children, there is this abyss in front of you. It's almost like you run really hard up to this canyon, and then you can see the other side, but it feels like you're going to fall off a cliff. It really does. And you look down and it's just devastating because you're like, at best, if I don't die, I'm going to have to climb all the way back up. So that's best case scenario. Worst case is that I die while I'm down there and my career is over, right? And so I see my job as helping them understand that they don't fall off a cliff at all, and that, I'm 46, and even I at 46, even if I've just retired at the average age of 65, I've got almost my entire career in front of me again at 46. So when you're 30, you've got kind of 2 careers ahead of you. So you've got time. Like, you don't have to be, and you're a great case in point, Giles, because you said it yourself. You were like, I've got to be a millionaire by 25. I've got to be I've got to own my own company by 30. And you probably thought that you wanted to be retired with a boat by 35. It's like, just relax. It'll happen. But you've got so much time to make it happen. So it doesn't even need to happen in this job or in this company. It can happen at another point. So I wish I knew that, if I'd known that when I was at REA, I would have taken off a year and enjoyed it with my job. But I felt like I couldn't because, oh my God forbid that I might take a year off.
I preach the same thing because, you taught at university, you go to university, you decide what you want to do, and you're kind of told that you need to go straight into work in your 20s, and the whole of your 20s is going to be the career that you're going to be doing for the rest of your life. But I didn't know what the hell I wanted to do during my 20s. No. It was only until I hit my 30s that I actually kind of sat back and thought, why have I struggled so much and just wasted so much time thinking about what I want to do when I should have really been being creative and doing what I wanted and just finding myself. So now being 30 into my 30s, actually sitting back and thinking, I actually have time. You do have time. There's no rush to get into anything. A lot of people start their businesses and are successful at 40 years old. And it's teaching people that age.
I think that it's my only caveat to that would be, and you, as doing what you do, know this way more than I do, but the only caveat I would say from a working mum perspective is that one thing I have noticed is if you leave it too long, so saying that you have a lot of time, and you do have a lot of time, if you go and have 10 years off, it is incredibly hard to come back.
Oh, yeah.
So I think there is I'm more thinking about what I said, because I was like, there's plenty of time, take what you want. But actually the flip side of that is I do know people that have taken 10 years off And you know, think of what's happened in the last 10 years. You can't get back, right? Like you can't.
No,
and you must see that from a recruitment perspective. People are like, she's what? She's been off for 10 years.
Yeah. to be honest with you, I mean, you could send a CV and someone could have maybe had just a couple of years off, and the client will question that quite heavily. And that could have been any point during a 10-year span. So it is a huge thing, and it's something that actually companies should actually, and it's something I do as a recruiter, trying to educate clients that that they need to look past something like this. You need to you're hiring the person. Sorry, my door's just slammed. You're hiring the person, the personality, and what they've done over those 10 years is very, very important, obviously, and you're looking for that background. But someone's had a certain amount of time out, then you need to be able to look past that, because it's the individual that you're hiring. And
but I think I think 2 years is ridiculous. You should just employ, like, if you can't get past the fact that someone's had 2 years off, that's ridiculous. You know, I had 2 years off after my son and came back way stronger and way more confident than, but I think 10 years, it's not about the employer. I think it's more about the employee and just the confidence. I question, and it's probably quite a controversial thing to say, but so I don't know if I would do it incredibly publicly, because I'm sure there's a heap of haters for this, but I don't know whether it is realistic to come back after 10 years and expect to slot back in either where you were, or, you know, and particularly in tech, and, you know, there's just so many you got to keep your hand in it somehow. And if that means, but it doesn't have to look like, you know, you can think laterally. If I have I did do this after my son. I started my own business, and I think that starting something small so that you can keep your hand in it, like, there's so many different ways. You don't have to go back into corporate land. But 10 years is a long time, I think.
How do you think the industry should change to really facilitate getting women back into work?
I think I think it's flexibility. You know, I think I think it's a flexibility and a mindset thing. So, you know, just those kind of, like what you were just talking about, that mindset of, oh, well, she's been off for 2 years, so, you know, maybe she's not as good as the. I think our industry is quite ageist, actually. So I think that people look at older women and a little bit ageist, to be honest. I think, but it really comes down to just supporting someone to come back in the way that they want to come back. That's what's going to get women back into the workforce, and recognizing that once you've had kids, it's actually hard. Like, it's an emotional, guilt-ridden journey back into the workforce. And so as a business, you know, we've got one at Mon who we adore. Monique's coming back on April the 5th, I think it is. And I am incredibly excited about her coming back. I cannot wait for her to be back in the business. But it has been really important to me that we make clear to her that at any point she can change her mind. She can come back in a different way. She can, because she needs to feel in control. Because so I think it's just, I don't know. I would like to think that more females you need to create role models, just like everything. Like, you need to have people like me that have been on maternity leave, come back, worked part-time, been successful. You know, those are good role models to put in front of people to show that, because it's a confidence thing. You know, can I go into my employer and ask to work 3 days a week? Of course you can. You're you're amazing at your job, but you'd be surprised at how many people don't do that, because they don't even give their employer the chance to say no. So
flexibility and choice.
So flexibility of choice and just a focus. And like I said, I think that the government needs to step in and create a 4-day week.
Yeah, do you know what? I mean, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree, and I've seen it. I've seen it work at Versa.
Yeah,
that's the thing, firsthand.
Yeah,
people are happier.
Yeah, we should just do. Can you imagine a life where everybody? And I think that we should do it like we do it. Have a day off in the middle of the week. So Wednesdays, I don't know, if everybody was off in the middle of the week, then maybe Tuesday night would become a massive night. So maybe we should just do a 3-day weekend.
New Friday down the cherry tree.
But allowing you to have 3 days, because it's almost like there's just not enough. Once you've got kids, it's just not enough time to do everything that you need to do. So, and people want to give back in society, and like people generally are really good and they want to give back, but they just don't have the opportunity to be able to do it. So I think even creating an extra day would actually allow a chunk of our society to, maybe give their time back to somebody who needs it, and that, somebody that, my story has ended, or it not ended, but to bring us up to date is one of my best friends has got early onset Alzheimer's, and I've ended up as her primary carer. And, it's been a real learning for me on, how to manage that and manage the business and manage the family and stuff. Yeah. But that's exactly the kind of situation that, looking after an elderly parent or spending more time with friends that need it, you should be able to do that. Anyway, back off my soapbox. Sorry, that's me.
No. I mean,
you're never going to get away with a conversation with me without me.
I know. Well, look, we've come to a natural end here. I know you're short of time now. So, look, amazing story, Kath. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. It's great to hear.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
I've been excited about this all week. And you can tell me all the exciting stuff later on. What's that, sorry?
I hope it lived up to your expectations.
No, you have. I'm sure there's a lot of things you held back on, though.
I'm sure that. Well, remember, you don't say everything in public, do you? Do you know what has happened to me a couple of times? It's been as I've had a more public, profile. I've had to learn. I've learned the hard way that stuff that I say, it ends up and someone shares it or you get tagged or whatever. And I spend quite a big chunk of my time. I only just did this a few weeks ago, going back to people and saying to journalists and saying, I know I said that, but I didn't really think about what it would look like in print, so yeah. So that is why I'm a little bit more cautious these days. Anyway, it was lovely to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kath. Really appreciate it.
No worries.
And,
good luck.
I'll speak to you again soon.